Hey, what's up? So these are the techniques that will get you good photos. After years of taking photos, years of studying and analyzing professional photos, here are the best techniques I know. I'm going to show you a ton of examples both out here as I take them, as well as in Darktable, which is where I do my post-processing. And hopefully by the end of this video, you will know how to take a good photo. I'm going to start with composition because it is really the base that every other technique is built off of. To start by giving you a definition, composition is just how you're going to arrange the various elements in your image. I think my goldfinch here does a pretty good demonstration of a bunch of the different elements of composition, so I'm probably going to keep returning to this photo. To start with, your image is just made up of lines and patterns and textures and shapes, and you can probably easily identify those in this image. We've got a bunch of different shapes, so the shape of the leaf, the shape of the thistle, the shape of the goldfinch itself. We've got a lot of different lines, so the stem kind of coming down. The leaves are shapes, but they also, have lines that they're made up of. There's pattern and there's texture, and just quickly the difference between those. So I would say the feathers of the goldfinch here are a texture, whereas the thistles are becoming a pattern because they're repeated. There's, 4 different thistles in this image as we go through it. Lighting is the thing to start with when composing your image. It doesn't matter what kind of lighting you want, whether you want your subject frontlit or backlit or 3/4 or silhouette. Anything works, but be intentional about it. Depth of field, aka the distance from the nearest to the furthest in focus point in your image, might be one of the earliest considerations as you compose. You'll notice with a relatively shallow depth of field, it's going to draw your attention to the subject here. The branch is also in focus. You'll notice we have this branch way in the foreground, this little one that is not in focus, and then the trees in the background are also not in focus. And you can obviously see that because the bird is in focus, that's where your eye is going to go. You're not going to be, staring at this tree in the background that's out of focus. So that's one of the most obvious uses of depth of field. And if you don't know, on your camera, to get a greater depth of field, what you want to do is increase your f-stop. Here's a great example of depth of field in real time. I'm using these branches in the foreground to create depth in the image. The branches are right here in front of me, and then the sunset is way back there. And you can see there's a huge distance between them, leaving the sunset blurred in the background and the branches crisp in the foreground. Leading lines are a really good way to direct your viewer's focus to the point that you want them to focus on. You'll notice in this image we've got our line of our branch that starts at the bottom corner, it goes up and it takes us to the nuthatch's claw here, which is in focus. We've also got a subtler leading line, which is this branch right here, that's taking us to the nuthatch's beak. And to me, those are the main points of focus on this image. Maybe its tail as well at the end of this line, but those are good examples of how to use leading lines. Leading lines don't have to be super overt, but it's basically any line that you can see in your image that's going to direct you to a point of focus. Rule of thirds is one of the most common compositional techniques that one uses to get balance in an image. It basically says you're going to have 3 different sections, both horizontally and vertically in your image, and you want to balance out what's going on through those sections. And the intersection points of those lines will be where your eye is drawn to focus. I actually don't have any perfect examples of this in the photos that I was looking through. However, in this photo I got of the robin, you can see the background here is in the top third, the middle ground is blurred in the middle third here, and then the foreground is in focus in the bottom third. A rule worth mentioning is that I've heard you should crop to the bird's eye, so put the bird's eye at an intersection point and then give it the other, 2/3 here to breathe and look into. And of course the same would apply if you're taking photos of humans or, I don't know, anything else with an eye or anything else that's going to have, a clear point and you want to give it space to look towards. That's not a hard and fast rule. I think this photo still works despite the bird's eye not being at one of the intersection points, though you will notice the eye actually is running through this horizontal line. So take the rule of thirds with a grain of salt, use it as a rule of thumb rather than a hard and fast rule. You don't always have to perfectly apply the rule of thirds either for it to still do its job, which is to bring your eye to the intersection point here. Using the golden ratio or a golden spiral is another classic technique for composing your image. I think it does result in a very aesthetically pleasing image if you can manage to really get your image to adhere to it. In this case, I don't think this is adhering very well. It sort of lines up a little bit. It's enough to the point where you could say, okay, maybe that's a little bit of the golden spiral, but it's definitely not perfect. However, you will notice that a lot of the most critically acclaimed photos of all time do involve the golden spiral or the golden ratio in some way. Pay attention to the edges of your shapes as you are cropping a photo. I think this is actually a really good example of what not to do when you're cropping, because I have a lot of shapes that are actually just going out of frame. Obviously, to some extent, that will sometimes be unavoidable, but I think, unfortunately, this image just would not lend itself to a good crop regardless. It's worth going for really low angle or really high angle shots because you'll get a lot more of an interesting point of view than just a plain old head-on shot. Visual balance in your image is pretty important, and I think this has a really good visual balance, and it also has unity, which I'm gonna get to last in this video. The visual balance here, I think, is really demonstrated by this tree balancing out this path. We've got our reddish-brown path in the front and our blurred, darker reddish-brown tree in the back. I also think the leaves and the bushes on both sides of this image do a really good job balancing each other out. You probably already know the basics of color theory, and the basics are really all you need. You've got warm colors, which are going to be nice and inviting. You've got cool colors, which are going to be the opposite. You've got analogous colors, which are next to each other on the color wheel, and then you've got complementary colors, which are opposite each other. And you probably already knew all of that. I think this is one of my best images in terms of color. We've got our complementary colors here of the yellow of the flower with the light purple of the background, the lavender here. And then we've got the analogous colors of the yellow to the light green to the, light green blue here. I think this actually works really well in terms of colors, and if you can try to, when you're composing your image, look for those sorts of colors, either overt complementary colors or potentially analogous colors to sort of give a subtler tone to your image. Working with color and being intentional about it is really important. I want to talk about contrast in the same subsection as color here, because to me they actually serve the same purpose in a photo, which is setting the mood of the photo. You might have noticed in a lot of my photos, they are very low contrast, sometimes really grainy. Grain is a separate thing, but they're very low contrast. What I will often do is take the blacks and bring them up a little bit to a gray, sometimes add in some color with them as well. And to me what that serves is it brings you a lot closer in the photo. It's a lot more of sort of a comfy setting rather than being loud and overt and in your face the way high contrast is. And of course you can use this intentionally and to your advantage to convey the mood that you want to convey with a photo. A very high contrast black and white photo with little grays in it is going to be super loud. It's going to tell you, here's what's going on. Look at this photo, look at this high contrast between the black and the white, whereas a really low contrast, orange and brown and gray and sort of just muted tones is going to be a lot more comfortable. It's going to sort of allow you to sit and take it in. Here's an example of really intentional color adjustment to create a certain mood with this image. I've really taken up the darks quite a lot. I've taken down the highlights a bit. I've made everything this sort of, neutral reddish brown here, and I think it makes this image feel a lot closer to the viewer than if I had left the original colors, which I think the original was like kind of a greenish background compared to the red cardinal, and that was a lot more jarring than this sort of neutral, reddish brown tone. Unity is the X factor between a good photo and an excellent photo. Unity is all of the various elements in your photo working together in harmony, in sync, to convey whatever it is you want to convey to the viewer, whether it is a feeling or a mood or a theme. Unity is everything working together to do that. I think my goldfinch here is one of the best demonstrations of unity that I could give, because I think this image overall has so many various aspects that are all really working together in harmony. To start with, the framing of the image in the first place is this upside down branch with the goldfinch also upside down on it. And yes, it's not rotated at all. They're just hanging there. The goldfinch is hanging on the branch. I think that works really well. You'll notice the branch with the thistle at the end there is also framed just barely by these lines in the background. Of course, it's really blurred due to the depth of field, but I think that framing really adds to it a little bit there. We've also got the goldfinch orange beak. This triangle shape is paralleled throughout the image with these triangular leaves. We've got this orange triangle that's actually pointing the same direction there as the goldfinch beak, and we've got that triangle shape sort of extended throughout the whole image. The other thing is the color. The goldfinch is predominantly yellow, obviously, and then the thistle is mainly purple. It's purple and green. So we've got a lot of purple, we've got some green as well, we've got, yellow, orange, green, sort of analogous colors there. And I think just overall, this image is really, really harmonious. This probably is one of the closest to perfect photos that I've ever gotten. Unity and cohesion among a collection of images is also incredibly important and is what will tie your collection together. If you're working on a series, make sure that you have certain elements throughout that series that will be in unity with each other, whether that's going to be color or mood or tone of the image or even just the same subject in each image. Have something that will tie all of those together. 2 tricks to give you inspiration if you are struggling to find things to take photos of. Number 1, wait for golden hour. Golden hour, if you don't know, is the hour around sunset or sunrise, and it does 2 things. First of all, it makes everything technically easier to shoot because you don't have to deal with the high contrast lighting of midday sun. So golden hour is just going to make everything easier to work with. And then secondly, it's also going to give everything this, beautiful ethereal quality to it as the sun sets, and you can also get, the classic sunset photos if you want to. And then number 2 trick, wait for random or chance occurrences. Some of the, best and most critically acclaimed photos of all time were simply of interesting chance occurrences that the photographer happened to catch. So if you keep your eye out, you might see something really interesting, and if you have your camera with you, that might be the once-in-a-lifetime photo. Don't be afraid to take 100 or 1,000 photos until you finally get the one, because a lot of my best photos came after 100 of the same thing, adjusting settings, trying to get the angle perfect. That's how you get, the one, and you'll see that photo and be like, oh yeah, this was it.